Discovery. The twin suns of Proxima Centauri B dipped low on the horizon, casting long trembling shadows across the windswept dunes. Every grain of sand seemed suspended in molten gold as retired Earth Marine Marcus Reyes trudged toward the skeletal remains of the Horizon Research Station. His boots, once polished to a mirror shine, were now scuffed and sandblasted, testament to months spent wandering the outer colonies in search of purpose. Each step crunched amid shards of ceramic and twisted alloy. The station's collapsed solar arrays and toppled antennae lay strewn across the dunes like the bones of some colossal, forgotten beast. Marcus paused at the rim of a collapsed observatory dome. The curved panels, designed to peer into Proxima's cobalt sky, had cracked like eggshells under an unseen assault. His neural HUD flickered as it attempted to catalog residual energy signatures. Nothing. No plasma residue, no fusion blasts, no footprints beyond the perimeter, only the silent echo of devastation. He wiped sweat from his brow where the heat sinks in his armor-vented excess thermals. Out here, 300 light-years from Earth, there were no rules, only survival. He dropped to one knee beside a half-buried cargo pod marked Xenobiology, Priority Alpha. Runes of hardened gel and sand crusted its seams. Marcus pried it open with the butt of his rifle. Inside lay empty cryo tubes, their contents long since vented to the arid atmosphere. He sank his hands into a stash of ration packs, scanning each wrapper for edible proteins. As he pulled out a thermosealed pack, a faint, desperate sound reached him. A cry so raw it bypassed his veteran calm and clawed at his chest. Marcus froze. He pressed a finger to his ear, muted comm channels, and listened. The sound came again, a high-pitched whimper, fragmented by distance. It wasn't human, and yet it was undeniably alive. He rose, rifle at the ready, and followed the noise across the dunes. Each pulse beat through his limbs with a soldier's reflex. Scan, approach, neutralize threats. But what threat emitted sorrow? He circled a fallen support beam, mind racing through every xeno-species he'd encountered. Wyverns? No. The Cryova legends? Impossible. And yet, as he approached the twisted metal of an old communications tower, he saw motion. 8 tiny shapes huddled together beneath the ragged shadow of the beam. Their bodies writhed, battered and gaunt, their scales shimmering faintly in cerulean and emerald hues. Wings no larger than a Terran bat's lay torn and folded against brittle ribs. One small creature lifted its head, eyes wide and unblinking, liquid gold pits reflecting the dying suns. Marcus' throat went dry. He allowed the rifle to click open, safety on, and knelt. The hatchlings, no larger than house cats, shook with each breath. His combat instincts warred with a deeper impulse, the urge to protect. Where had they come from? Who would abandon such creatures in this savage wasteland? No time for questions. He laid down his pack and activated his portable medkit, the nanogel injector humming to life in his gloved hand. Gently, he scooped up the nearest hatchling. Its scaled body was cold as the void between stars. The creature's heartbeat fluttered against his palm like a dying moth. Marcus pressed the injector to the creature's side, depositing a sliver of healing gel. It hissed softly, an angry, wounded sound, but did not struggle. Around him, the other 7 watched with luminous eyes, their trust fragile but growing. In that moment, the veteran Marine felt an ache deeper than any battlefield wound, the realization that solitude was a price too heavy to bear when life so wondrous and unheard of cried out for compassion. Night fell swiftly on Proxima's desert. A sweep of indigo pierced by 1,000 distant suns. Marcus fashioned a crude shelter from the beam and his remaining thermal blankets. Wrapping the dragons in warmth, he hummed an old lullaby his daughter once learned, a trembling melody carried on a breath of hope. As the hatchlings drifted into a fragile sleep, Marcus pressed a hand to the sand and whispered a vow, "I've got you now." In the eerie silence, the desert seemed to listen, and the first chapter of a new mission had begun. Nurture. Dawn's twin suns had barely crested the dunes when Marcus Reyes awoke to muffled cries. His makeshift shelter, a tangle of support beam girders and heat-retaining blankets, still held warmth from the thermal coils he jury-rigged the night before. 8 dragonlings, their scales dulled by dust and exhaustion, huddled close in a trembling knot of wings and claws. Their eyes, bright as polished gems, followed his every movement. Marcus sat up slowly, muscles protesting the ache of yesterday's labors. He swept a hand through his thinning hair, then paused, realizing that for the first time since his discharge, he felt needed. A soldier's purpose had returned, embodied in these fragile creatures. He reached for his medkit and produced a clear vial of nanogel serum. The smallest hatchling, a sapphire blue beauty no larger than his forearm, whined as he inspected the ragged tear along its wing. Gingerly, Marcus applied the gel. The wound hissed as nanite stitched scales back together. The hatchling trembled, then nuzzled his palm in a gesture of unexpected trust. Food was the next concern. Marcus rummaged through his remaining supply pack, protein bars, ration gels, dehydrated fruit slices. He mixed a spoonful of nutrient paste with purified water and coaxed the hatchlings to lap it gently. Their hunger was fierce. Each slurp echoed in the quiet morning air. One emerald-green hatchling pawed at his knee, frustration clear in its mournful chirps, until he dripped a single precious calorie-dense gel into its mouth. Relieved, it purred, a rich, rumbling sound that thawed the solitude Marcus had carried since his final tour. As he fed them, memories surfaced unbidden. His daughter's laughter aboard the ISS Kansas City. Her insistence on bedtime stories even when alarms rang overhead. The letter he never mailed apologizing for missing her 5th birthday. Regret coiled within him but was quickly displaced by present needs. The hatchlings required shelter, food, and protection from Proxima's harsh climate. With the station destroyed, Marcus had to improvise. He spent the morning salvaging what he could from the wreckage, intact panels, functioning power cells, medical supplies. By midday, he'd constructed a larger shelter against the curved wall of what was once the station's storage bay. "This'll do for now," he muttered, watching the dragonlings explore their new home. Their movements grew stronger with each passing hour, scales brightening under his care. The nanogel had worked wonders, healing the worst of their injuries, but these creatures needed more than medicine. They needed nurturing. That afternoon, Marcus watched in awe as the oldest hatchling, a copper-scaled beast with emerald-flecked wings, managed its first tremulous flight. It launched from his shoulder, wings beating furiously before gliding in a wobbly arc across the shelter. The others trilled in excitement, stretching their own healing wings. "You're a determined little squad, aren't you?" Marcus smiled, a rare expression that cracked the hard lines of his weathered face. By evening, he'd begun cataloging their personalities. The copper one, bold and protective, he named Vanguard. The sapphire runt, clever and quick, became Spark. Each dragonling earned a designation based on their emerging traits: Scout, Ember, Echo, Wisp, Titan, and Phantom. As night fell, Marcus sat cross-legged among his charges, their bodies warm against his. He scrolled through his ancient tablet, searching colonial databases for references to draconic species. Nothing matched. These weren't listed in any xenobiological registry. Either they were undiscovered, or someone had very deliberately kept them off the record. "What are you?" he whispered to Spark, who chirped inquisitively from his lap. "And why was someone keeping you at a research station out here?" The questions haunted him as he drifted to sleep that night. 8 small bodies nestled against him, their synchronized breathing a lullaby more soothing than silence had ever been. Connection. 2 weeks passed in the shadow of the ruined research station. Marcus had established a rhythm, scavenging by day and returning to the hatchlings by nightfall. The dragons grew rapidly, doubling in size, their movements more coordinated, their vocalizations increasingly complex. His rations wouldn't last much longer. Soon, he'd need to find sustainable food sources or make contact with the nearest colonial outpost, Helios Junction, 3 days' trek across the northern dunes. Marcus sat at the entrance of their shelter, cleaning his rifle as the setting suns painted the sky in violent crimson streaks. Vanguard, now the size of a large dog, perched beside him, copper scales gleaming. The hatchling watched his methodical movements with intense focus, mimicking the way Marcus held the cleaning cloth between thumb and forefinger. "You're a quick study," Marcus remarked, passing the cloth to Vanguard. To his astonishment, the dragon took it awkwardly in its forelimbs and attempted to wipe down its own wing, mirroring Marcus's precise motions. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered. That night, as the dragon slept in a pile of scales and tails, Marcus felt a strange sensation. A prickling awareness at the edge of his consciousness. Dreams came to him in fragments, alien landscapes, crystalline caves, vast oceans beneath ice sheets. He saw through eyes not his own, felt the rush of air beneath impossible wings, the heat of twin suns warming scales. He woke with a gasp, heart hammering. Beside him, Spark's sapphire eyes gleamed in the darkness. Hunger. Safety. Trust. Fear. The impressions flooded his mind, primitive but unmistakable. Not words, but pure concepts, raw emotions. Marcus stared at the small dragon. "Are you, in my head?" His voice cracked with disbelief. Spark chirped, and another wave of sensations washed over him. Recognition. Affirmation. Need. Marcus reached out with trembling fingers, touching the dragon's head. How? Over the next few days, the mental connection grew stronger. At first, only emotions transferred, simple needs and basic sensations. Then came images, memories. Marcus discovered that the hatchlings shared a collective consciousness, their minds linked through what he could only describe as a psychic network. And now, somehow, he had been admitted into their mental communion. Through their shared connection, Marcus learned fragments of their origins. The dragons weren't an accident of evolution or some corporate bioexperiment. They were ancient, their species having slumbered for millennia in eggs buried deep beneath Proxima's surface. The research team had discovered them during excavation, collected the eggs, and begun studying them in secret. Then came disaster, a security breach, an attack by unknown forces. Marcus sensed only terror and confusion in the dragons' memories of that day. Their eggs, accelerated to hatching through emergency protocols, had barely cracked open when the station fell. They dragged themselves from the shattered incubation chamber, only to find themselves orphaned in a hostile world. Until Marcus. On the 17th day, while Marcus instructed the dragons on hunting the small, six-legged lizards that scurried between the dunes, Vanguard suddenly went rigid. The copper dragon's mind broadcast a sharp warning: danger. Approach. Weapons. Marcus dropped to a crouch, rifle instinctively in hand. "How many?" he asked aloud, before realizing the futility of verbal communication. He focused instead on the question as a concept, projecting it toward the mental link. 3-2-1. Metal bodies. Cold minds. Vanguard's thoughts came packaged with imagery, humanoid shapes moving across the dunes, the distinctive silhouettes of advanced combat armor. Corporate security. Colonial militia. Whoever they were, they posed a threat. If they discovered the dragons, Marcus had no doubt they'd want to capture or eliminate them. The hatchlings were too valuable, too miraculous to risk. Back to the shelter, he commanded, both verbally and mentally. "We need to hide." As they retreated, Marcus felt a surge of determination. The dragons had given him purpose. He wouldn't let anyone take them away, not when he'd finally found something worth protecting again. Protection. Night fell like a cloak thrown over the desert. Marcus crouched at the far edge of their shelter, dragons hidden behind him in the darkness. Through a narrow opening in the salvaged panels, he watched three figures approach the ruined research station. Their exo-armor gleamed under the twin moons, weapons drawn. "Sweep for biomass," ordered a voice, artificially amplified. "Anything over 20 kilos gets tagged." Marcus recognized the armor's design, Axiom Corporation's elite security force. The same company that owned the research station. The same people who'd been experimenting on the dragon eggs. Fear. Hide. Protect. The collective anxiety of the hatchlings pressed against his mind like a physical weight. Quiet. Still. Wait. Marcus pushed back, his military training asserting itself through the mental link. The dragons settled, their breathing synchronized with his. The security team moved methodically through the wreckage, scanning with handheld devices. Marcus's augmented hearing caught fragments of their conversation. No survivors. Assets missing from containment. Director wants the specimens recovered. One soldier approached their hiding spot, scanner sweeping. Marcus tensed, hand on his rifle. The beam of light passed once, twice over their shelter. A moment stretched like eternity. Then the scanner beeped, drawing the soldier's attention elsewhere. Got something. Biological trace, heading northeast. The team regrouped, their focus shifting away. Follow it. The specimens couldn't have gone far without sustenance. Marcus waited until the patrol had disappeared over the dunes before relaxing his grip on the weapon. The dragons swarmed around him, chirping quietly, relief flooding the mental link. We can't stay here, Marcus whispered. They'll be back with reinforcements. That night, under cover of darkness, Marcus packed what supplies remained. He fashioned a crude harness system to carry the smaller dragons and instructed the larger ones, Vanguard, Titan, and Echo, to follow closely. By dawn's first light, they were miles from the research station, heading southwest toward the unexplored territories. The new landscape proved challenging, canyons of rust-colored stone where sand gave way to jagged rock formations. Yet the dragons thrived, their natural affinity for the harsh terrain becoming evident. They showed Marcus hidden water sources, sensing moisture beneath cracked earth. They hunted cooperatively, flushing out burrowing creatures that Marcus collected for their communal meals. Their mental link deepened. Marcus no longer needed to verbalize his thoughts to communicate. The dragons responded to his tactical training, forming protective formations as they traveled. Vanguard always took point, Echo served as rear guard, while Spark, ever the scout, ranged ahead, sending back mental images of the path before them. On the fourth day of their journey, they reached the edge of a massive gorge. Far below, a river of molten minerals flowed, casting an eerie orange glow against the cliff walls. On the opposite side lay rolling highlands, more hospitable terrain with scattered vegetation and sheltered valleys. We need to cross, Marcus decided, studying the narrow stone bridge that spanned the chasm, likely an abandoned mining construct. As they began the treacherous crossing, a familiar sound cut through the air, the whine of repulsor engines. Marcus looked up to see a sleek transport ship bearing Axiom's insignia descending toward them. Run, he shouted, both aloud and mentally. The dragons bolted forward, wings extended for balance as they raced across the narrow bridge. The ship's external speakers crackled. Marcus Reyes, former colonial marine. Stand down and surrender the specimens. They are property of Axiom Corporation. Marcus reached the center of the bridge and turned, rifle raised. They're not specimens, and they're not property. Those creatures are worth more than you can imagine, Reyes. The telepathic network they've created with you proves their value. Our scans detect the neural linkage. Hand them over, and we'll compensate you generously. The dragons huddled behind him, their fear and defiance mingling in his mind. Marcus felt something else too, an emerging plan forming in their collective consciousness. Not happening, Marcus called back, backing away slowly. Find something else to exploit. The ship's weapon systems hummed to life. This is your final warning. What happened next occurred with such synchronized precision that later, Marcus couldn't determine whether the idea had originated with him or the dragons. As energy weapons charged, the 8 dragons suddenly acted as one. Their bodies began to glow, scales illuminating with bioluminescence that pulsed in perfect rhythm. Through their mental link, Marcus understood instantly. He dropped to one knee, covering his eyes. A blinding flash erupted from the dragon's scales, a defensive mechanism encoded in their genetics. The pure white light cascaded outward in waves, temporarily overwhelming optical sensors and human vision alike. The ship lurched sideways, its pilot momentarily blinded. Systems went haywire, proximity alarms blaring. Now! Marcus shouted, and they ran. The bridge vibrated beneath their feet as the ship regained control and fired, missing them but striking the ancient structure. Stone cracked, supports groaned. As they reached the far side, the bridge began to collapse. Marcus leapt for solid ground, Echo and Titan just behind him. But Spark, the smallest, couldn't make the final jump. The gap widened, the blue dragon chirping in panic. Without hesitation, Marcus launched himself back toward the crumbling edge. His augmented muscles propelled him forward, arms outstretched. He caught Spark mid-air, cradling the dragon against his chest as they plummeted toward the chasm below. In that moment of freefall, something extraordinary happened. The mental link between Marcus and the dragons intensified 100-fold. Power surged through him, alien yet familiar. The 7 remaining dragons lined the cliff edge, their minds unified in desperate purpose. Marcus felt a tingling along his spine, a lightness in his body. The fall slowed, then stopped altogether. He hung suspended above the molten river, Spark clutched protectively in his arms. Then, gradually, impossibly, he began to rise. Legacy. Marcus floated upward through shimmering air, carried by invisible currents of psychic energy. The dragon's minds enveloped his own, their collective will defying gravity itself. As he reached the cliff edge, the sensation faded, leaving him breathless but unharmed. Spark leapt from his arms, joining the others in a chorus of triumphant trills. The Axiom ship hovered nearby, weapons trained on them. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the pilot's stunned expression. In that moment of revelation, Marcus understood what the corporation truly sought. Not just telepathic creatures, but the source of the dragon's power, their ability to manipulate physical reality through collective consciousness. A weapon beyond conventional understanding. You can't have them, Marcus declared, standing tall among his charges. And if you try to take them, you've seen what they can do. The ship remained motionless, its weapons still primed. Then, to Marcus's surprise, it slowly ascended, banking away into the darkening sky. He felt no relief, this was merely a tactical retreat. Axiom would return with greater forces, better prepared for the dragon's abilities. They pushed onward through the highlands, moving by night, hiding by day. The dragons continued to grow at an accelerated rate, their bodies adapting to the harsh environment. Their mental abilities expanded proportionally. Where once they shared only emotions and simple concepts, now they exchanged complex thoughts, strategic planning, even fragments of cosmic memory encoded in their ancient DNA. Through their deepening bond, Marcus glimpsed the truth about the species. These weren't merely animals or even simply sentient beings. They were inheritors of an intelligence that had evolved on Proxima B eons before humans dreamed of the stars. Their ancestors had witnessed the birth of civilizations across multiple worlds, using their psychic abilities to travel vast distances through space-time folds that defied conventional physics. "You're not just survivors," Marcus whispered one night as they huddled in a crystalline cave. "You're messengers." Vanguard, now shoulder height to Marcus, pressed a scaled head against the marine's palm. Understanding. Purpose. Unity. On the 20th day of their exodus, they reached the highland's heart, a sheltered valley of surprising fertility. Here, geothermal vents warmed the soil, enabling plant life to flourish. Natural caves pockmarked the valley walls, offering defensible shelter. More importantly, the surrounding mountains contained deposits of magnetite and other minerals that would mask their biosignatures from Axiom scanners. "This is it," Marcus decided. "We make our stand here." Over the following weeks, they prepared. Marcus used his combat expertise to establish perimeter defenses, while the dragons hunted, explored, and strengthened their collective abilities. Each day brought new discoveries about their capabilities. Ember could generate intense heat, melting solid rock. Scout could project her consciousness miles beyond her physical body, sensing approaching threats. Together, they developed silent communication protocols, combat formations, contingency plans. Marcus knew Axiom would eventually track them down. The corporation's reach was vast, its resources nearly unlimited. But he refused to run forever. These dragons deserved more than a life of perpetual flight. The inevitable confrontation came on a clear morning 60 days after their escape from the research station. 3 ships appeared on the horizon, larger than before, escorting a troop transport. Marcus counted at least 30 armed security personnel deploying in tactical formation. He stood at the valley's entrance, rifle slung across his back, a symbolic gesture more than a practical weapon. Around him, 8 dragons arranged themselves in a crescent, their scales gleaming in the morning light. No longer fragile hatchlings, they had grown into magnificent creatures, each unique yet unified in purpose. The Axiom commander approached under a white flag. "Marcus Reyes," she called. "Final opportunity. Surrender the specimens, and you walk away a wealthy man. Resist, and we are authorized to use lethal force." Marcus smiled thinly. "You still don't understand what you're dealing with." He glanced at Vanguard, who now stood eye level with him. "They're not specimens, they're not weapons, and they're certainly not yours to control." "Then what are they?" the commander demanded. "The future," Marcus replied simply. At some unspoken signal, the dragons moved forward in perfect unison. The Axiom forces raised their weapons, but hesitated at the sight of the magnificent creatures advancing with deliberate calm. What happened next would later become legend throughout the colonies. 8 dragons and 1 former Marine, standing before an armed corporate force, not in violence but in communication. The dragons extended their psychic network, deliberately including the Axiom personnel in their mental communion. Images, emotions, knowledge passed from dragon minds to human consciousness, the history of their species, their peaceful intentions, their unique perspective on existence. Most importantly, they revealed the truth about their kind. They were not merely 8 survivors, but the vanguard of thousands more eggs buried throughout Proxima B, awaiting the right conditions to hatch. The effect was instantaneous and profound. Weapons lowered. Faces registered shock, wonder, revelation. The commander herself sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the mental contact. "You see now," Marcus said quietly. "They're not something you can own or control. They're offering partnership instead." In the days that followed, an unprecedented agreement took shape. The dragons would share certain aspects of their knowledge, technological insights, scientific understanding beyond current human capability. In exchange, they would receive protection, recognition as sovereign beings, and a guarantee that their remaining eggs would be allowed to hatch naturally, under their care. Marcus Reyes, once a lost soldier seeking purpose, found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to what became known as the Proxima Draconis. His neural link with the 8 original dragons made him uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between species. 5 years later, Marcus stood on a plateau overlooking the valley, which had transformed into a thriving settlement. Human scientists and colonists worked alongside dragons in a community like none other in explored space. Below, he watched young dragons, the children of his original 8, playing with human children, their minds naturally forming the gentle bonds that would shape a new kind of civilization. Vanguard landed beside him, magnificent wings folding against an iridescent copper body. The dragon was now massive, powerful beyond imagination, yet still recognizable as the hatchling Marcus had once cradled in his palms. Gratitude. Memory. Family. Marcus nodded, his weathered hand resting on Vanguard's scaled shoulder. "We did all right, didn't we?" In his pocket, he carried a communication chip containing a message he'd finally written to his daughter back on Earth. An invitation to visit, to witness what her father had helped create. A chance to heal old wounds and build new connections. As twin suns set on the horizon, Marcus Reyes, soldier, rescuer, ambassador, stood among the legacy he'd never expected to create. 8 desperate hatchlings had changed everything, not just for him, but potentially for all of humanity. The galaxy would never be the same. And neither would he. The end.